we're already, with the previous lecture, already in part 1 of the course. There are 3 parts I explained. Part 1, which is about fundamentals. Yeah, and now I need American idioms here. The hair is rising on my back when I bring up this topic. Yes, the doctrine, if you really pay attention to what people teach you, the doctrine in science during the more than 100 years, since the late 1800s, is that the truth lies at the bottom. The bottom meaning the smaller and smaller scales. Particles are huge. Now they're talking about subparticles and subparticles and all this. If you want to get to the origin of not the origin of true things, but truth itself, you need to bow and scrape to these people who do basically extremely fancy materials and other things that you cannot see and you cannot draw. That's called reductionism. And reductionism literally means exactly that, which is to boil something down. Yeah, that's reduction in pharmacy, to a smaller and smaller volume. Fundamental is something else. Fundamental means, yes, literally at bottom, because fundus means bottom in Latin. Like the pedestal of a statue is the foundation of the statue. The house has a foundation. And the fundamental in the foundation is the brick, the fired brick. And the fired brick is finite size, the size of that plastic box. You can kill with the fundamental piece, yes, but you can also construct with it. And civilization today, following the invention of the fired brick, is based on that. And so that is one example of fundamental. There are many such examples in science. You can scratch your heads, really contemplate the antithesis of, say, finite fundamental versus invisible, smaller and smaller size jargon called reductionism. So, and the brick has shape, it has a structure, it has properties such as strength, and you can build with it. And design itself comes from the ability to imagine the construction element, like the straight line or the cylinder and the sphere in the building of things, starting from geometry. And the fact that these fundamentals allow you to see drawings in your mind, and then drawings on paper, and eventually objects and wealth. That's the end of that particular train route. Okay, so part 1 already started, is about fundamentals. And in the first lecture, I gave you an example of how to imagine the birth of one of these designs. That design was the shape of a territory populated by people in motion. These are not, people out of control. Every single individual had a purpose, an objective, a need, and without realizing, meaning unwittingly, they found or they felt that a particular design of that territory is good for their movement. And the example was the Atlanta airport, which is the icon of the birth of any city block. And the solution that I put on the blackboard was done 2 ways. One was imagining that the point of view of the designer was altruistic to benefit the least advantaged traveler on that airport. I call that the altruistic approach. And the other one, leading to the same solution, was the egotistical, which took into account the needs of every inhabitant of the area. So that is what I thought. And the solution that I gave in two ways was actually, the first one was based on the intersection of asymptotes. I'll make the sketch because I have something to tell you which is very important. If this was the time of travel, one person, or the average time over everybody, it was that was versus the shape of the of the territory. It was at the intersection of the two asymptotes. The intersection indicated the useful result. And to develop formulas or back of the envelope expressions for these asymptotes is a lot easier than figuring out the complete curve and then resorting to your knowledge of calculus, if you still remember that. Small footnote here. Calculus, the name for it is mathematical analysis, not calculus, was the rage in the 1800s. It had been invented 1 century before that. And people had trouble with it because it was basically jargon, even to those who knew geometry and were very well schooled in math. So that was in the 1800s. Then the 1900s is when calculus was taught broadly, meaning worldwide. And today, this is my observation, today in the 21st century, thanks to software and other tools, young boys and girls do not get it because it's easier to click on something or to buy a piece of software than to learn to reproduce or to relive the excitement of those who discover these solutions. And talk about the Lagrange before the Bernoulli. Euler was the main inventor of the calculus of today. So it is for that reason that the intersection of the asymptotes, meaning something that's easier to manipulate, even though it is calculus, even these asymptotes come from that kind of knowledge. It is for that reason that the intersection of asymptotes is important and useful. And pleasing to me, because until yesterday I thought that I invented this method. And then, because I talked to people who are not necessarily from around here, those are called the philosophers, one of them drew my attention to the fact that Aristotle said it first. He wrote this: in life, place yourself quote, between too much and too little. Meaning, avoid the extremes. Yeah. Now, back then, philosophers all the way to today are philosophizing. They're not hitting you with formulas. But that is the idea, that if you know the extremes, you know where the middle is, or the armpit, the intersection of the extremes. And that is the way to be. Da Vinci, who obviously knew, he grew up in Tuscany, meaning near Florence, he knew those people knew everything from the Bible to, and Aristotle and stuff. She was advising, if you want to, it's all about life, okay? You should get up from the dinner table while you're still hungry, which meant somewhere between starving and overeating, you see? Think about that. Meaning practice thoughts that make you smile, but thoughts that empower you. All right. Beginning with these, with the problem solving, which I described as warm-ups, like training before you enter the game. The course itself begins that way, and that is chapters 1 and 2. You should flip through them. They'll remind you of courses you've taken. These courses are listed on the blackboard during the first lecture. We're not going to repeat what you've been taught. But the introduction to this course is one that alludes to those disciplines in a helpful manner. And the help comes from seeing your disciplines as basically teaching the same lesson, you see. And this is why today I will talk about the disciplines assembled in or put together in chapter 2 under the headline of Imperfection. Imperfection, a negative term. You would prefer to have a perfect engine in your car, not an imperfect one, you see. Or for that matter, a perfect screwdriver, not the one that doesn't fit properly in the whatever you're trying to turn. You see that? But those examples are too mundane. I go back to the disciplines that you've been taught. I will show you how thermodynamics and then its predecessors, mechanics, or in this case, fluid mechanics, and heat transfer. By the way, these two were older than thermodynamics. How they all teach the same thing. Even though in one discipline after the other, the doctrine is not about what unites them. And it's about the fact that every single one is about flows, things that move. In fluid mechanics, a fluid is moving. It is moving in a continuum. You have to imagine streamlines to make a drawing. You see, I'm exhaling as I speak. There's a flow. You do not see it. You do not see it. You can imagine it if you, sprinkle some confetti. You'll see them flowing in a particular way, and that's how you know that I exhaled. So fluid flow is invisible, but with calculus, meaning with the Navier equations, you can solve for the flow field and then wave your hands and show people images of the flow, images that came from your mind and from your pencil, but not from your viewing apparatus, which is your two eyes. Get it? So that's fluid mechanics, precursor to thermodynamics. The other one I mentioned already is the fancy name for caloric theory, that this heat current, of course, is conserved. has a path and a particular zip to it, you know. It could burn you. It could freeze you. You get it? It has effect. And then came thermodynamics. Thermodynamics began with Sadi Carnot and the concept of engine. In which, of course, all these things were present, the fluid flow in the piston and the cylinder apparatus, the heat transfer, you know about heating and then cooling at the bottom end of the engine. So thermodynamics is the big tent of all these things that move. And Sadi Carnot, his memoir was about the engine and why engines cannot be more efficient than what he predicted. And then the rest is history. The rest is history in the sense that the people who picked up the ball and ran with it were not the engineers. Sadi Carnot was a mechanical engineer. Were the other ones, the physicists. And they end up making thermodynamics into a very thick book in which the engine is a very small page and a rare word. And that is too bad, because the engine, as I'll show you along the way, was not invented by man. It was, in fact, all over what is known as nature. The engine, yeah, every animal is a vehicle, a small truck or a big truck carrying water. The animal has a motor or a motive design, you know, musculature, you know, skeleton and all that. And then, of course, it has a lot more, which has to do with vision and the sensory organs and brain. Because animal locomotion is not rolling the ball at the bowling alley. It is a guided locomotion. It is a kind of locomotion just like in these most modern airplanes, where the mover is empowered with maneuverability. You see that? Okay, so engine. And what can we say, or how can we now discover imperfection in each of these disciplines?